Doctors of Reddit, what are some of your worst experiences with anti-vaxxers? After reading all these, I am completely in favor of a law that would find parents guilty of manslaughter if their child dies from a disease that they weren't vaccinated for because of the parent's decision not to. I completely agree. It's heartbreaking that parents kill their own children because of their own stupidity. People like that should never have children in the first place. I work as a consultant in a palliative care practice. We help families navigate complex and often difficult decisions in acute illness. My worst anti-vaxxer experience was in the critical care unit. Woman in her early 60s and otherwise healthy. She got the flu from grandchild. Not vaccinated, and neither was anyone in the family. Faith is strong. She was on a ventilator for hours. Respiratory failure. Then the vent was not enough and she was placed on ECMO. Heart lung bypass. Her kidneys shut down and continuous dialysis was started. She developed a GI bleed from the acute distress. Eventually got off ECMO but needed permanent ventilation. Visitors could not comprehend that this was the flu. Her father became an ICU patient after a week of declining to wear a mask. Not sure if his exposure was extended family or the patient. His sister, PT aunt, also got admitted but stayed out of the ICU. They were 2 of 6 patients in the ICU because of the flu. As I met with extended family and discussed permanent ventilation, feeding tube, long-term dialysis, vent facility placement, lack of consciousness, they kept asking how could we have prevented this. One adamant Google Doc daughter kept spouting debunked autism claims relating to vaccination. I finally looked at her and said, "Your mother is not dying from autism. Dad was old and went into heart failure and died 2 days later. Patient struggled for a month before becoming septic and dying in full life support. Aunt survived as far as I know. Not sure if that beating was a come to Jesus moment for the family. Yikes, 80,000 dead last year from the flu and now a chickenpox outbreak in NC. Darwin has an evidence-based practice from the grave. I'm a doctor but don't work in the NICU. Hubby does. Every time there's a crying mom behind the NICU doors who fell for the vaccines and vitamin K shots or evil crap on social media before giving birth and her newborn gets the intracerebral hemorrhage, bleeding inside the brain, that vitamin K prevents. He says it's just heartbreaking because it's something so horrible that could potentially be avoided with one little sting. Once the parents actually realize what they've done, or rather not done, it's just such a heartbreaking picture to look at. On the one hand, you kinda want to think that hey, you actually believe that these loons on your baby group or whatever FB quackery group that brainwashed you know more than doctors and scientists purely based on bad googling and inability to differentiate between a decent research and just crap they put online and call evidence. On the other hand, you have this deep sense of sadness for the family and what they're now going through, especially the baby since none of it is the baby. Hubby says the image of these crying moms is something you never want to see and can never forget. I'm not a doctor but a nurse and had a whole family with measles and they blamed the government and Obama for their illnesses. Thanks Obama. Asked a patient who had a few IVs connected for an infection and asked if she wanted a couple vaccines. She said no way. I have no idea what are in those things. I don't even think she remembered what IVs she was getting. The dental version of anti-vax is anti-fluoride. I had a patient in school that was super anti-fluoride and stated he had been researching fluoride before I was born. When I asked him what school he went to, he stated he did his research on his own. One day I was doing a crown on this patient and he was gagging every few seconds. I stop and ask him if he is okay and he stated it's the fluoride in this water. It is choking me. This was nano pure deionized water, so I told him, sir, there is no fluoride in this water. It is reverse osmosis deionized. Even with copious amounts of water he did not gag again. I met a nurse who is an anti-vaxxer. The reason is they're not 100% safe. I said no medicine is 100% safe. Their response was then they shouldn't be on the market. I asked if that includes ibuprofen. They said yes. This nurse is not only anti-vaccine but anti-medicine. It was very disturbing. By that logic, we shouldn't have cars, food, physical activities, or anything at all. Nothing is safe. You could literally be the healthiest person that has ever lived and is going to live, and you could drop dead from a brain aneurysm. Nothing is safe. I have one about homeopathy. Wife and I had a baby a month ago. We had a doula that was anti-vaxxer essential oil person. When they removed my wife's placenta, she began to hemorrhage. Instantly they bring a bag of Pitocin and hook it up to her. I look over and the doula has angry eyes and is poking me to tell them to stop putting those chemicals in my wife. Frick that. I tell the doctor she does whatever she can to save her. Eventually they call in a surgeon and they take emergency measures to stop the hemorrhaging. She ended up losing 3 liters of blood, but the amazing professionals were able to save her. After, the doula told me the reason my wife hemorrhaged was because she couldn't rub some bullcrap essential oil on her legs. What a freaking idiot. Not a doctor, but my mom was a nurse. I'm vaccinated against everything. Twice. If there is any link between autism and vaccination, I would be so far out on the spectrum I would be classified as a particle. This comment is the only one in this thread that made me not burst into tears. I think I may have told this story before. Happened when I was in surgery residency on ped surgery. Strongly anti-vax mother delivered sub 30 weeks. She refused to have even a VitK injection. Baby predictably had a brain bleed and died. Brain death, but organs were fine, so they decided to donate. While waiting for the harvest, the vent blew both the lungs with big pneumothorax and they were having trouble oxygenating. I had to put in chest tubes bilaterally with my staff on this brain dead 3-day-old preemie. The mother stayed and watched. She was clearly in shock. I never saw her again. Sad and preventable. Not a doctor but autism parent here. A friend's child was also diagnosed with autism a few years back and a closeted anti-vaxxer she knew immediately came to see her and informed her that it was all her fault because she had gotten the kid their vaccines. She then proceeds to tell her that the only way to reverse the brain damage was to feed the child nothing but raw coriander for 3 days and perform that MMS pause. Thankfully my friend wasn't dumb enough to fall for that BS. Pediatric nurse here. This patient left a mark on me. 18-month-old, admitted to a community hospital's pediatric unit. Respiratory symptoms. I notice right away this kid is working hard to breath. She starts getting worse. I'm starting to worry. Kids don't give warning when they crash. They crash fast. I'm talking with the other nurse on and I mention she's unvaccinated. As soon as I say it, I realize it could be epiglottitis. I remembered in nursing school learning about how dangerous epiglottitis was, and the professor saying they used to see it all the time. Kids would drop dead, but how we would never see it because kids are vaccinated against what causes it. I called the doc. I say what's on my mind and that she needs to put in for transfer. She thinks I'm overreacting. I don't wait. I called the children's hospital. Go through the situation. I end with, send the helicopter. Now, doc finds out I've done this. Calls the helicopter overkill. The mom asks if this is her fault. Now, I had told her when we started escalating care that because she was unvaccinated it meant we were ruling out more serious things. The other nurse I was working with looked this woman in the eye and said, yes, this is your fault. I sincerely hope that led to this kid getting vaccinated. She did live, incubated upon arrival to the children's hospital, spent 2 weeks in the PICU. Not a doctor, but I worked at a community clinic for a few years, and my office was right next to our medical director's office. One day I walked by her door, wide open, and noticed she was sitting at her desk with her head in her hands. I knocked and asked if everything was alright. Turns out she had just spent an hour in an exam room with one of her pediatric clients and his parents. The parents were divorced. One was anti-vax and the other was not. You can imagine how that went. Lots of screaming and crying, with my poor medical director in the middle. Took care of a beautiful 6-year-old girl who was intubated on a vent because her parents didn't think she needed a tetanus vaccine. She had stepped on a nail and not been treated. I cut a chunk of her foot out at the bedside and managed her vent for 2 weeks. A few $100,000 later she was better, but she did almost die. Vaccines save lives. Not a doctor, but when I was in nursing school, I was with a patient. The doctor came in and told the routine of vaccines. The mother said, I don't think that is necessary, my child should be healthy. The doctor then told her, well, you should plan for your child's funeral just in case, since you don't want to take care of newborn. I will have the student nurse get you some info on a funeral homes. The doc just walked out of the room. I'm a psychologist who works with kiddos who have developmental delays such as autism. Every couple of months I have parents who think that vaccinations cause their child to have autism. I present the facts, but ultimately they are not really interested in hearing the reality. Sometimes I think they just need something to blame. I can't say I wouldn't find something to blame if I had a child with autism. It is heartbreaking. I have an autistic child and have a brain, and also am part of a few FB groups that have members upwards of 10k in number. All parents or caregivers of autistic children. Either none of them are anti-vaxxers, or play the blame game, or they hide quietly because we never hear a peep about any of that crap. We've shamed people into recycling, picking up dog poop, and not littering. For the common good, I super judge anyone walking their dog without a plastic bag. I hope we can get to a place where we consider vaccinations a similar public good and refusal to participate is considered selfish and antisocial for similar reasons. That's where we've always been. It's that anti-vaxxers can't be shamed. Public health professional here. I get to see cycles of poverty and miseducation perpetuate as parents pass along bad info and kids don't pick up the right info at school, or their parents tell them to ignore that info. There was a mom with a 4-year-old who rallied against vaccines and tampons because they cause cancer. She was feeding her toddler hot Cheetos at the beginning of class. Mom is anti-vax because her 2-year-old son got vaccines and soon after began to act out and misbehave, like a normal 2-year-old would. Now she won't vaccinate her newborn baby. I actually work in health insurance, but when certain procedures or conditions are brought up, we have to go over certain benefits, prior authorizations or med policies. I got a call where I had to go over immunizations for this reason. Over the next hour, the caller wished cancer on my kids. I am 18 and not even dating. Demanded to speak to my supervisor. Demanded to speak to her supervisor, and went into graphic detail about how we are all drinking the Kool-Aid. Honestly, I am happy I got that call. It's a fun story. I'm a doctor and I am not even from America, and there was this post on a social forum against vaccines and I was baffled by the number of people who were against a vaccine. One particular female was so adamant that vaccines cause autism and brain damage. I tried giving her valid reasons and research journals proving her assumptions wrong, but she refused to say anything back. She wanted me to have an open mind and think about my ancestors. Yay lady, most of our ancestors used to die WTH smallpox, now it is eradicated. When I was a student nurse we had a child with cystic fibrosis come into emergency with a chest infection. The poor kid was unvaccinated as well, meaning that she was more likely to catch every freaking thing going around, causing more damage to her lungs, and making the point at which she needed a double lung transplant come faster. Not a doctor, but an M4. 16-year sick patient hospitalized for suicidal ideations during a hospital visit for a chemical burn from patient's All Saints Day costume. Patient repeatedly requested to be put on medication and get therapy, however father wouldn't allow it. Father is an anti-vaxxer, anti-medicine, fanatic Christian. Wouldn't let patient hang out with opposite sex. Same-sex friends were allowed to hang out if he was able to visually monitor interaction. No phone, car, or internet. Withdrew patient from school. Only permitted patient 3 hours daily of Khan Academy math videos. Also had cameras in patient's room. CPS got involved. I was an intern and the way things are done in my country is that you have to do 4-month rotation in 6 different departments. I was an obgyn. I was in the delivery room. I delivered a beautiful baby girl. I was about to give the routine vitamin K shot as I informed the mother. Pretty standard stuff. She screamed at me to stop. Told me she doesn't want her baby contaminated by chemicals and vaccines. She was a doctor. This will get buried, but pediatrician here. I was talking with a parent who refused to vaccinate and was kicked out of other practices as a result, and tried to reassure them about safety. Their response: I'm not going to go to the corner drug dealer to find out if H is safe to use. I went and took my Lo to get her flu shot the other day, and somehow me and my family doctor got on the topic of anti-vaxxers. She's been my doctor since I was born and now is my daughter's doctor, so I know her well, and on top of that she's very candid. She told me that every child in her practice is vaccinated, and if a parent refuses, after she tries to clear up their misguidance, To do so, she advises them to seek another doctor because she doesn't work with child abusers. She says they usually don't come back after that. LOL. I mean, I agree though. I personally think there should be a list of mandatory vaccines that if not met, the guardian can be charged with child neglect. It actually kind of blows my mind this isn't the law already. I don't get how the American government doesn't enforce vaccination on infants. In Portugal, you can't enroll in the first grade of school without an up-to-date vaccine card, and school is obligatory, so you either vaccinate your kids or you get CPS called on you for not putting your child in school. There was a young female student at university who was very outspoken, opinionated, and a know-it-all. No one liked her because she would always have something to say about everything, and would speak over other students in class, and make classes drag on over the allocated time. Anyway, one day we had the university's medical nurses informing us of the vaccines we needed to prove we had, so that we can work in certain areas, hospitals etc., and that if we had not had the vaccinations, we could get it sorted out through the university. This girl pipes up and asks, what do I do? Because I've never had any vaccinations. The whole lecture theater went quiet for a second. Then people started laughing. The nurse's answer was an obvious, you need to get all the shots. Then she ended up dropping out after the first year. Thank frick. Orientation for radiology program. A girl says she refuses to vaccinate herself for her toddler. The speaker said, well, cool. You can leave them because it's required. The girl said she was filing a complaint with the program director. The speaker was the program director. Not my story, but a family friend's. She was a nurse who'd go around and give shots around in Walmart and other large super chains. So one day she was doing her job as normal when a woman rushes in with a child and hurries over to her open station since the line was empty and asks her to quickly vaccinate her nephew for school. And she made sure they were really related, then gave him the shot. After this, the mother bursts into the store and begins yelling and screaming about how her son was doomed now, along with trashing the table she was using. As you can probably guess, she was removed by security, but not after screeching at her son about how he was going to be retarded and autistic and too bad we can't follow up a few years later with psycho mom and ask sarcastically how she's coping with her son's autism retardation. Not a doctor, but have a story nonetheless. I was raised as a podunk, super Mormon town with many anti-vaxxers. We aren't religious. I was vaccinated against pertussis. I got it anyways when I was 16 or so. I went to the local doctor, who properly diagnosed me, and since my case was mild, he sent me home with some meds and an order to stay away from others and to call immediately if things got worse. I was good, so I stay in quarantine as best I could, and none of my family came down with any symptoms. 3 weeks later, I hear about a bunch of other people in town coming down with the same thing, including the doctor, who was presumably vaccinated. I never got the whole story down, but I was apparently patient zero for a community of unvaccinated families and one poor doctor. Happy ending, since no one died. Family physician here. It's not nearly as dramatic as you'd think. I tell mom what vaccines are due, and if she declines or delays them, I ask why. Whatever answer she gives, I tell her that her conclusion is not evidence-based and vaccines are beyond safe. If she still says no, I move on. I encourage her to return anytime to complete the vaccine series if she changes her mind. I try not to be judgy because that only reinforces the resistance. I live in California, so declining vaccines has sadly become more common. I know several who ban people from the office if they won't get certain vaccines for their kids. This keeps them from infecting kids too young to get the vaccines due to the parents being pieces of crap. Also, California has laws about vaccinations and the ability to go to school. Frick anyone who won't vaccinate when they can. Frick anyone who says it's okay, too. Not saying you are. My mom is a doctor. Once she had a patient who had really bad diabetes. I don't remember exactly, but his A1C levels were super duper high. He needed to get a shot for something. Don't remember what. And he didn't want to get it because he thought he would get Down syndrome. Not a doctor, but I shadowed a pediatrician as a pre-med student, and parents used to come in behind the other parent's back to get vaccines when the other was an anti-vaxxer. Also, people still pull up that false autism study on their phones and say it's the reason they won't do it. Actress Gene Tierney's daughter was permanently disabled due to prenatal rubella. She caught the German measles during a World War II USO tour, and because she was pregnant at the time the consequences were devastating. Gene carries permanently the scars of the day, more than 4 years later, when she placed her daughter Daria in a school for the mentally retarded. The emptiness inside me was like a cave, she says. She was a sweet little girl, with golden curls and soft skin. Physically she looked just like any other 4-year-old. I cried for Daria and I cried for me until I didn't know where the tears came from. Now 35, Daria still has the mind of an infant and is confined to an institution in New Jersey. More than a year after the little girl was born, Gene was approached at a party by a former woman Marine who said they had met at a USO canteen 2 years earlier. The woman added that she had been quarantined at the time with the measles but had sneaked out to see Tierney anyway. I just had to go, the woman gushed innocently. You were always my favorite. Stunned, the actress said nothing. Family doc here. At a newborn checkup, I counseled a mother on vaccines. She refused. When I asked why, she told me that Big Pharma paid off doctors with expensive vacations. I replied, please get me the name of that company. I'm lucky if the drug rep leaves me a pen. She actually vaccinated her kid afterwards. I'm a mid-student. A substantial number of my fellow students don't want to get vaccinated against the flu. The same goes for many nurses around here. One colleague of mine said she didn't get the flu vaccine because there could be aluminium in it. Just read the freaking label, Karen. There's no aluminium in a flu vaccine. And even if you're goddamn mid-student, you should know better than this. That's so freaking ridiculous. I remember in my med school class only one person said something akin to that and everybody ridiculed them until they got it. Plus it was mandatory at my school anyway or you'd get put on probation. I don't even care if the CIA did put nanobots in it. My sister is a nurse. She was assisting a woman who just gave birth. The mother asked her about when to get her new son vaccinated. She told her everything she needed to know. The mother's mother was in the same room and lost her crap when the newborn mother asked and threatened to take her newborn son away from her to keep him safe. They were escorted out. I hope everything is okay with their family now. I haven't seen it myself, but supposedly there is a situation at the office I work at where one parent wants vaccines and the other strictly does not. At the well child checks, they will go home without vaccines so other parent is happy. Later on the parent wanting vaccines will come back to get the child vaxxed. Curious how that plays out in the home when the anti-vax parent finds out. Had a pregnant mother come in with her kid for a really bad cough that wouldn't let up for almost a month. She said she made the poor kid just eat one of those small teddy bears of honey to soothe the throat and gargle salt water and some other homeopathic remedies. Poor girl had whooping cough. The mom blamed her childhood vaccinations for bringing this plight on my child. Offered her some prophylactic antibiotics cause she's pregnant and all. She said I don't need it cause I got vaccinated. Remember? If it works like you said it does, why are you offering me something to treat something I'm supposed to be immune to? Or is it all a lie like I said and vaccines don't make me immune like you claim? I has a guy around 30 years old who didn't want to get a pneumonia shot. Ended up getting strep pneumomeningitis and went totally blind. All the blind people I've interacted with up until that point, and since, have been blind for some time and thus had some experience with it. This was the first time I'd ever seen a man newly blind struggle to put his coat on, figure out where the chair in the room was, or have any clue where he spatially was. It was so depressing. Get vaccinated. The worst was when I was in medical school. She actually brought her daughter in to get catch-up vaccines. Why? Because her other daughter was in the ICU with fulminant meningitis from a vaccine-preventable illness, hanging on for dear life. The nurse there sat her down and told her point blank that she rarely sees this disease because people are vaccinated for it. The mom couldn't understand how her girl had contracted it. We asked if she knew anyone who wasn't vaccinated. Apparently no one in her church vaccinated, and several had been sick recently. She couldn't believe the source could be them. The kicker? She also brought her son to clinic, but refused to vaccinate him, saying he's my only son. No matter how we explained it to her, she believed giving her son the vaccine would result in brain damage. As part of my training a few years back, I had to do a GP plasmat in hippy dippy alternative medicine central of the UK. Most of the time wasn't any issues other than the occasional person insisting on the benefits of crystals ETF, but most would also follow along with what we would advise also. I did see my first and so far only case of rubella German measles in a 3-year-old. However, the incident that came to mind was a lady who had encountered a few times LS before. She was upper middle class, university educated, English degree, but convinced of the evils of modern medicine vaccinations. Said they had monkey brains in it. Anyway, one day she came in complaining of severe nausea, latex early in the morning and associated with certain smells and foods. Asked her if there was any chance she could be pregnant. She says no. She did have a positive pregnancy test a few weeks ago, but that she had dealt with it. Intrigued, I inquired further. She stated she did it the natural way. On further question, this natural method consisted of putting a bunch of herbs up her vagina for a few days. She seemed extremely annoyed when I suggested we perform another pregnancy test just to make sure. And wouldn't you know, still freaking preggers. Crazy. I remember when the HPV vaccine was first released, I had been following the research. Nurse here, and called the pediatrician to get it for my kids. They didn't have it yet. Keep bugging them about it. Finally, my youngest was the first in that practice to get. They refused to do my son as it was for girls only. Too late, it was finally for boys. I mean, if there was something that prevented 90% of cervical cancer warts etc., why would you not protect your kid? Had a 3-mo come in with a clear meningitis picture. Mum claimed that he was just a little behind on vaccinations. Ended up growing Haemophilus influenzae B from his spinal fluid, one of the bacteria that we routinely vaccinate babies against. Turns out none of her older children were vaccinated. She had a preschool age kid that was the carrier. Baby eventually went home, but saw him again a month or two later with new seizures. Found to have sterile abscesses in his frontal lobes. Had to have a shunt placed, the whole 9 yards. I still think about this kid from time to time and feel sad contemplating what he could have grown up to become if his parents hadn't been so selfish and stupid. One of my patients told me her PCP told her to avoid getting vaccinated because it sounds stupid to put viruses into yourself intentionally. I was WTFing so hard. I work in ICU and watch adults die because they did not want a flu shot or pneumonia shot. Flu has killed more people than war. Get your flu shots. This is not just about parents but all of us protecting those who cannot survive the flu. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.